Welcome to ICRTH 2022 Industrial Sessions on Cultural and Heritage Tourism. I, Dr. Ida Inko, and Dr. Marie Carr are your session chairs for today. Today, we have three speakers that will share with us their perspective on their cultural and heritage tourism. We will begin with the first speakers, Dr. Phoebe Everingham. Dr. Phoebe Everingham is the casual academic, Newcastle Business School, University of Newcastle, Australia. Dr. Phoebe Everingham has an interdisciplinary background in human geography, sociology, anthropology, and tourism management. Her research expertise is focused on sustainable tourism developments and responsible ethical tourism. Dr. Phoebe is passionate about community-led tourism development and cultural tourism. She has worked with NGOs and not-for-profit organizations in Peru, Ecuador, and Australia. She believes that working towards sustainable and equitable futures involve rethinking economies and learning from different cultural practices and worldwide. Without further ado, please join me to welcome Dr. Phoebe with her topic on tourism and cultural heritage. Dr. Phoebe, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phoebe Everingham, and I'm an academic at the University of Newcastle, Australia. I sit on the editorial board of several top international tourism journals, including Annals of Tourism Research, Tourism Geographies, Tourist Studies, and the Journal of Responsible Tourism Management. I'm speaking to you here today on stolen lands. In fact, pre-colonisation, Newcastle was named Mullumbimba, and this was a name that came from the sea fern that grew in the harbour. Unfortunately, though, there's no longer any more sea fern due to the environmental degradation that has occurred in this country since colonisation. So I speak from the lands of the Ecological and the Worimi people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to thank the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Sarawak, the Faculty of Hospitality and Tourism Management at UCSI, Sarawak Research Society and Emerald Publishing for asking me here today to present on this panel. Cultural tourism embraces the full range of experiences that visitors can undertake to learn what makes a destination distinctive, its lifestyle, its heritage, its arts, its people, and the business of providing and interpreting that culture to visitors. The term cultural tourism is an umbrella term that defines a product category, meaning that within cultural tourism we can differentiate or distinguish a range of cultural tourism types or forms. But culture is not something fixed and frozen. It's a process of constant struggle as cultures interact with each other and are affected by the broader economic, global, political, social and cultural picture. So when we talk about cultural and heritage tourism, it's important to consider, well, what do we mean by culture? It's not something that's fixed and frozen. So cultural tourism, as presented as a product for tourism consumption, has all sorts of implications for how tourists and hosts present their identities, and implications for cultural commodification, which can be bound up within stereotypes of how tourists gaze on hosts, for example. My research on cultural tourism takes a third space perspective that sees culture as performative, fluid, and negotiated between hosts and guests. So-called traditional cultural identities are often done in reflexive ways by hosts. For example, creatively pulling together elements of stories from different cultural traditions. And if we think about culture in this way as being performative and fluid, fixed identities can be unsettled and new ways of understanding cultural tourism is opened up. And this can allow us to reconceptualize how we understand self and other. So in my research, I focus on the intersubjective encounters, the spaces of the in-between, where cultural identities are negotiated through embodied encounters and in the interactions between hosts and guests. And it's really important to facilitate intercultural learning and exchange within these encounters. And I'll talk more about this when I present some of my research on volunteer tourism in South America. So cultural tourism is not a new phenomenon. People have been travelling for cultural reasons since ancient times. And culture and heritage are intricately connected to the appeal of tourism destinations. It's also one of the most notable and widespread forms of contemporary tourism and one of the fastest growing sectors. The links between tourism and cultural heritage bring up all sorts of interesting sociological questions, such as in what ways does tourism act as a medium for tourists to understand other cultures? Cultural tourism can act as a powerful medium for intercultural understanding, peace, and even justice. But there's also issues around the commodification of culture. And we have to remember as well that tourism transforms destinations, traditions, and lifestyles, and is therefore politicised because there's always going to be contested notions of place, culture, and heritage. So some of the theoretical frameworks for understanding cultural heritage tourism include things like mobilities, identities, globalisation, the tourist gaze, the host gaze, authenticity, commodification, representation, imperialism, neocolonialism, neoliberalism, and post-colonial and decolonial perspectives. So obviously in a tourism and hospitality context, there's been a lot of talk about how COVID has impacted the industry and a lot of debate around what the new normal looks like or will look like. COVID has actually caused an unintended degrowth, and I have argued in some of my work that this is not a bad thing if we're talking about degrowth of the most damaging sectors of the global economy. And much cultural tourism is bound up also within models that focus on static notions of traditional identities. So the COVID-19 pause really opens up an opportunity to rethink the entire tourism industry and also how this can be applied to cultural tourism. What I believe we need now is to use this opportunity of the COVID-19 tourism pause to rethink alternative economic activities that support what really matters, such as environmental, social, and cultural sustainability and regeneration. But of course, it's not a given that this push towards rethinking tourism will happen. However, I will continue to push forward this agenda in my research and practice. So rethinking economies along regenerative lines can actually grow well-being, creating different kinds of jobs in non-extractive sectors, such as regenerative tourism and cultural tourism. But firstly, we have to have an understanding of the economy as something that's not natural or static or fixed. The economy is actually a social construction. And this is the diverse economy's perspective, that the economy is made up not only of cash exchanges or monetary exchanges, but also various forms of labour, both paid and unpaid. And it opens up all sorts of questions about where we put our value. So once we think about the economy in this way, we can see people, society, governments as having agency to push forward new ways of understanding the economic value that we put onto the environment, people, and types of work. So there's already a lot of future thinking happening that's pushing forward new ways of organising economies, the increasingly challenging futures that we're moving into, not only because of COVID, but also because of climate change. So we're facing issues also related to resource scarcity. Oil's going to run out, for example, and this really necessitates new sustainable and regenerative business models such as circular economy. And donut economies are another way forward. Places like Amsterdam, for example, have used the COVID-19 pause to rethink what kind of tourism they want. So in relation to regenerative tourism models, I really think that volunteer tourism as an alternative moral tourism does have potentials to push forward these kind of agendas. The volunteer tourism industry before COVID was estimated to attract 10 million volunteer tourists worldwide, spending up to $2 billion annually. It's popularly presented as a more ethical alternative to regular mass tourism. Stephen Waring, back in 2001, emphasises the ethical motivations of volunteers, defined as those tourists who, for various reasons, volunteer in an organised way to undertake holidays that involve aiding or alleviating the material poverty of some groups in society, the restoration of certain environments, or research into aspects of society or environment. So there is a desire amongst volunteers to contribute to local communities, and when volunteer tourism is done well, there's lots of opportunities for cultural exchange. However, there are problems with volunteer tourism. The commodification component, for example, huge amounts of money are being paid by tourists, and this is often used to pay external people who are living in the developed world. So there are issues here around ensuring that the money is going into the hands of the local communities, and also that the local communities even want the volunteers there to begin with. And at times we've seen examples where volunteer experiences have been manufactured to provide tourists with a tourism product, as opposed to a more organic, mutual, intercultural exchange. So these manufactured experiences also, I argue, defeat the purpose of what motivates volunteers, which is to give back and to have deep and meaningful experiences with local cultures. So in my PhD fieldwork, I looked at 2 organisations in South America. In Peru, I was working with Ecological Network, and that is a not-for-profit government organisation based in a little seaside village called Huanchaco. And the organisation runs lots of projects for volunteers who either hook into existing local projects or where projects have been set up to benefit the local community. The skate ramp, which is where this picture was taken, was built on land that was donated by a local surf school and was designed to provide the children with after-school fun in a stimulating environment. And at the time of my fieldwork in 2013, various activities were taking place at the skate ramp site. Some of these involved local youth, building makeshift wooden shop fronts, painting old surfboards to decorate the site, and here we have the installation of a water tap. And these activities largely depended upon the initiatives and the skills of the various volunteers who were there at the time. And the kids really loved the skate ramp. I was in Ecuador in a little town called Baños, working with this organisation called Fundación Arte del Mundo. And its mission is to encourage literacy, creativity, and a love of the arts by providing a free after-school program for children and a theoretical entertainment for the greater Baños community. So I argue in my research that when intercultural understanding and when mutual intercultural interactions are facilitated in meaningful ways, that can actually provide tourists with really authentic cultural encounters. And there is a significant number of volunteer tourists who are primarily motivated by these meaningful, authentic experiences with local communities. This quote here really captures these kind of motivations. Bree, who was 34, 1 week into a 6-month stay at Ochocoza Network, says, "I think volunteer tourism is the kind of tourism that my generation and those younger are trending towards. Because as the world is more connected and developing countries develop, if you're not volunteering, you're usually staying in a fancy hotel. And no matter where you go in the world nowadays, you're getting the same kind of experience. And the only way to get a real cultural experience is to go and do some volunteering with locals." So there is a significant segment of the volunteering demographic that are looking for more authentic volunteer tourism experiences than what mainstream commodified volunteer tourism organisations provide. And some of these volunteers are actively searching for organisations that are offering a decommodified experience. Matthew's fieldwork in Costa Rica looks at the opportunities for tourists to work alongside locals who are trying to regenerate the population of turtles. So the volunteers go out in the night and help baby turtles into the ocean. And this also provides meaningful backstage experiences with locals where these cultural exchanges can be facilitated. So I'm linking volunteer tourism to these regenerative models, but I argue that there has to be a focus on the mutual cross-cultural learning and exchange to facilitate also the involvement of local communities in ways that they will truly benefit. So cultural heritage can facilitate intercultural understanding. The COVID-19 tourism pause has brought forward an opportunity to rethink cultural tourism along the lines of regenerative models. The economy is diverse and regenerative tourism models are needed. Volunteer tourism is an example of how cultural tourism can be regenerative. However, we do need to be aware of the potential of commodification and the problems of framing volunteering within neo-colonial development models. Thank you so much for having me, and please do feel free to reach out to me if you would like to know any more about my research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. PB. And to share more about cultural and heritage tourism, let us proceed with our second speaker for this session. Mr. Chris Flynn is currently the Executive Chairman of the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage, a position that requires liaison at the most senior level of industry, government, and academia. With 36 years executive level experience in international tourism and aviation, and having worked in a wide range of countries across 4 continents, Chris has developing an intimate knowledge of the industry and the requirements needed to identify critical trends that have the potential to influence development and expansion. Recognized as a leading specialist in terms of innovation and strategy, Chris is often requested to speak at high-profile conferences and events and is a regular contributor to leading news media channels such as BBC World News Asia Business Report, which boasts a live global audience in excess of 300 million. His insights and expertise are also sought by leading Australian and international universities and faculties, educating our future industry leaders being one of Chris' passions. Without further ado, please join me to welcome Dr. Chris Flynn with his topic, Redefining the True Meaning of Travel. Mr. Chris, over to you.
G'day, my name is Chris Flynn and I am the Executive Chairman of the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage, or as it's more commonly known, WTAC. Before I make my presentation, I would just like to thank the organisers for giving me the opportunity to take part in this important event, share my views and comments and participate in what is a very important discussion, especially as the world begins to turn once again for the tourism industry. My presentation today is Culture and Heritage in Tourism, supporting local communities. But before we get into that and what I believe regarding responsible tourism, I think it's important for us to take a little look back. Prior to COVID-19, UNWTO forecast that the world would reach 1.8 billion international tourists by 2030. However, by 2018, we'd already reached the figure of 1.4 billion. That was 2 years ahead of schedule or ahead of forecast. And if we actually continued that trend line, we would probably have reached 1.8 billion international tourist arrivals by around 2025. In 2019, following that trend line, we reached 1.5 billion international tourists. Now, I think it's important at this stage to define the difference between millions and billions because they sound the same. If I was to take 1 million seconds away from today, I would end up with about 12 days. If I take 1 billion seconds away from today, I end up with 33 years. So when we start talking about billions, you can basically see the potential for the issue that we could face. Now, that 1.5 billion was a 4% year-on-year change from 2018, where, of course, we were already 2 years ahead of forecast. And that equated to about 4 million tourists a day. So what did 4 million tourists a day look like? Well, it was a little bit like this. This is Venice. Of course, our sacred sites, our towns and villages, our historical sites and venues, all completely saturated with tourists. And of course, this was a problem. And all over the world, we began to see this sentiment: tourists go home. The irony of this is this also became a tourist attraction. But in different countries and different parts of the world, we saw the impact of our industry that was basically destroying the very fabric of the local communities. There was significant resentment, and that is down to a lack of planning, a lack of consultation, not having them have a seat at our table in the discussions when it comes to tourism planning. Of course, we've had COVID-19, and we are still managing the effects of COVID-19, and we will do for the foreseeable future. But although the borders are opening, it's important to note that we still have 500 million people around the world suffering from COVID-19. In fact, in my own state here in New South Wales, sadly, we lost 45 people just this weekend alone. What we do know about COVID-19 is the impact on our industry was swift and devastating. Although international borders are opening, it's safe to say that the future is still uncertain and very unpredictable. One thing's for sure: travel and tourism will not be returning to a new normal. In fact, it's already transitioning into a new paradigm. We also know that current research clearly indicates that traveler intentions and motivations have and will continue to change. There's a growing desire for more aspirational, authentic, and immersive experiences. And I think it's important to note that during the lockdown phase of COVID-19, the majority of people were sat in front of computers, not looking for the cheapest fare because they couldn't travel, but looking for what a destination truly has to offer and the opportunities that brings with it. So what we do know is that although travelers may seek to travel less, they will want to experience more. So trust has become a critical aspect of traveler decision-making. Now, trust, of course, from a safety perspective, from a health perspective, is something that will be on most people's radar as we begin to open up the world again. But another element of trust, and one that is significant and will significantly grow as we move forward, is in our marketing messages. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at some of our peak destinations around the world, here is St. Mark's Square in Venice, as an example. And this image here, like the other images, are taken from websites that are promoting the destination, official websites, as of today. So here we have Venice. This is the marketing message. The reality is more like this. The beautiful, pristine beaches of Thailand is more like this. The entrance to the old city of Dubrovnik is more like this. And even before COVID, people were growing tired of this saturation of people, this issue of over-tourism, this massaging of our marketing message to try and sell and promote a destination and to over-promote it, to bring volumes of tourists in all at the same time. People are not going to stand for this, although we're seeing a return to it. So now is the time to plan and execute strategies that seek to welcome visitors more responsibly. And I think this is what this conference is all about. This has to be done. We do see that as the borders are opening, all the discussion that we had prior to the borders opening seems to have evaporated. The discussions in terms of being more responsible, more sustainable. And I understand that because we live in a KPI society. We live in an environment where we have to be measured and have to show success, usually through volume. So, responsible and sustainable tourism development requires finding ways to reduce visitor pressure on popular destinations, minimizing the negative impact on local communities. And this comes back to what I was saying before, because local communities rarely had an opportunity to voice their opinion or to sit at a table and discuss the potential impacts of tourism on their lives and livelihoods. We need to engage with local communities so that they are part of the solution. We need to create evidence-based carrying capacity plans to better prepare and track visitor growth, to minimize these negative effects. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, at WETAC, we have a saying that is, you have to know what you can take before you break, because if you don't know what you can take, it's a recipe for disaster. And already around the world, we're starting to see the emergence of over-tourism again. So this carrying capacity concept and planning is incredibly important. We need to develop a 365-day visitor program. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's have a look here right now. This is latest figures, or recently released figures from UNWTO for January of this year, January 22. And you'll see here that when we start to look at these volumes as people start to return to travel again, we have Americas 97%, Europe 199%, Africa, Middle East, all showing significant volumes. In fact, the average is about 130%. And you would expect that with, pent-up demand, what's been caused by COVID. Problem is, for places like the US or Americas and Europe, January is the low season. In fact, it's the lowest part of the low season. And yet we're still seeing these huge volumes of returning passengers or returning travelers. And this is the problem here. And this can be taken from any year. This one's for 2017, but this can be 16, 19, 18, whatever, although it's been impacted by COVID. And this is what I'm talking about. This jump in this spike in visitor arrivals here as we squash visitors into our peak season because we think that's what they want. But is it? Is that what the research is basically saying? Because what about this bit? There's a word for this, and that word is opportunity. These are the low and shoulder seasons that are rarely crowded, that give us the opportunity to spread more equitably our visitation throughout the year. This is part of responsible tourism development. The other thing that we need to consider is greater regional dispersal. And of course, regional dispersal has been championed as a silver bullet for basically a solution to over-tourism, moving people around the destination. Of course, that's very important, but it can also be a complete nightmare if you don't educate, plan, train, and prepare these destinations that you're going to disperse these visitors to ahead of time. All you're doing then is moving the problem and potentially finding another problem later on. So responsible tourism development must begin with engaging with local communities as equal stakeholders. That's very important. Providing advice on the key benefits of tourism development, but also the potential issues associated with it, because there are many, as we know. We need to listen to their concerns and their perceptions. We need to offer appropriate training and upskilling on the key aspects of developing, managing, and succeeding in a tourism business. And of course, we need to ensure that they have enough government, local ministerial, and/or international donor support to enable them to plan financially for multiple years ahead. I'm sure we've all seen tourism development that has not been looked at from a position of 5 or 10 years hence, when we get our initial finance, when we put our initial resources into it, but we don't plan for how we're going to continue to develop more responsibly. At WeTech, in all of our training programs that we offer destinations and various different stakeholders in tourism, we have what's called the 6 Cs, and that is community engagement. And I will continue to go on about that because it's so important. Carrying capacity, understanding what you can take before you break. Cultural awareness. Often we see tourism development that doesn't consider the impact on local culture and local society. Commercial education and skills training. It's not just good enough to educate them about tourism. They need to be educated about how to run a business. Collaboration with key stakeholders that would potentially offer them the right distribution, if you will, to promote and grow their products. And of course, coordination with the local authorities, local ministries, and of course, financial institutions. But you know, if we get it right, we improve the lives and livelihoods of local communities. We create stable and sustainable and stable economic growth for these communities. We provide a 365-day revenue stream, not just during peak seasons, but throughout the year. We increase community pride. We give them an opportunity to grow and improve their socio-economic conditions, and within that, build pride. We preserve local traditions and local way of life. We help protect and promote the unique cultural heritage assets, both tangible and intangible. We establish platforms that help broaden their tourism programs, such as local festivals, cultural celebrations, local foods, arts, science, etc. And of course, we build a future for the generations to come. And that is what this is all about. So I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Flynn, for your insight. Next, let's continue with our third speaker for today, Dr. Victor Luna. Dr. Victor Luna is Head of Ecotourism and Community-Based Tourism Sections from Ministry of Tourism, Creative Industry and Performing Arts, Sarawak, or in short, MTCP. He holds Doctor of Business Administration, DBA, and Dr. Victor's field of expertise in protected areas management, ecotourism, and community-based tourism. And furthermore, he is also a trainer from tour guides in thematic interpretations. Without further ado, please join me to welcome Dr. Victor Luna with his topic, Enhancing Ecotourism Experience, Weaving Traditional Ecological Knowledge into Thematic Interpretations. Dr. Victor, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you for inviting me to present this paper entitled Enhancing Ecotourism Experience, Weaving Traditional Ecological Knowledge into Thematic Interpretations. As we all know that visitors' experience has been of great interest to many tourism providers and players, based on the premise that highly enhanced visitors' experience contribute to many things, especially on satisfied visitors. In turn, this will contribute to the increased number of visitors and positive word of mouth advertisings and political support. One of the ways that to enhance visitors' experience is through the use of thematic interpretations, which is regarded as one of the most important tools in enhancing the quality of visitors' experience, with a purpose to promote a perceptive attitude, shaping on-site behaviors by applying the principle of ecotourism and the tour model of thematic interpretations. The aim of tour guiding activity is actually to reveal the meaning and relationship of people about the place they visit and the thing they see and do while visiting the place. So you can see sometimes visitors going into a conservation site or even ecotourism site, some are there do not obey or comply to the legal requirements of the law. So in such a manner, we have to look into what are other qualities that can support the use of thematic interpretations in enhancing the quality of visitors' experience. So the role of thematic interpretations, it is defined as a mission-based approach to communication, which aim at provoking visitors to have their own thinking or their own thoughts and forging their own personal connection to the thing, to the place, to the people, and the concept within the area, with the outcomes focusing on enhancing visitors' experience, which is in the form of cognitive outcome, or even promoting appreciative attitudes, or shaping their behaviors while on sites. So these are the role of thematic interpretations. Traditional ecological knowledge. So this is the substance that we would think, how could we incorporate the element of traditional ecological knowledge into tour guiding? Now, this knowledge is actually a subset of indigenous knowledge, which represent a cumulative body, practice, and belief acquired many, many years by the indigenous people through direct contacts, through their direct contact with their environment. It is expressed in the form of many, many things. For example, in terms of stories, song, folklore, belief, ritual, socio-cultural norm, custom, and etc. The United Nations in 2013 has actually called for us to respect, preserve, and apply this traditional ecological knowledge for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in good manner. Of course, there are mounting evidence of successful application of texts into various disciplines to improve natural resource management and biodiversity conservation practices. In terms of issues that affecting our protected areas, as the world are getting globalized, you'll see that many of our natural resources are globally impacted in terms of conservation. And also, today, more and more visitors are educated, sophisticated, and they demanding better quality of service. Thus, there is a need to sustainably manage the impacts of ecotourism. Likewise, there are now enormous studies showing rapid disappearance or erosion of traditional ecological knowledge worldwide. Now, this knowledge is, in fact, has intrinsic values, and its global erosion was akin to a loss of global culture diversity because it will affect the cultural diversity at large. Despite the mounting evidence of its successful applications of text into various disciplines, there is actually little is known regarding the potential of traditional ecological knowledge, interpretive communication in enhancing visitors' experience, or even promoting their positive attitude and shaping their behaviors while in the ecotourism destinations. So in 2015, we did the study by applying or weaving the traditional ecological knowledge into interpretive guiding activities. We did it in 4 national parks in Sarawak, Borneo, and we select 81 selected trained tour guide, whereby when they did their on the job tour guiding after their training, 300 380 visitors were randomly sampled by them. And out of those 380, 89% were first-timers, 83 were foreigners, and 66.6 are very educated tourists. Then we employ self-administrative post-guided tour questionnaire to measure their perceptions. And we analyze it using SPSS. So accordingly, a good guided tour have good part. So we train them about tour guiding using thematic interpretation, using the topic of ritual and evils, with the main theme, some forgotten plant species that serve as ritual and as evil purposes in local communities. So with this theme, the tour guide was asked to provide the introductions, the body, and conclusions. In the introduction, they were asked to create interest in the topic, and they have to orient their visitors to the themes. This is very important so that their visitors will be able, wanting to hear more about it. And doing the body or the contents, we call this a stop. The tour guide was asked to select narrative stop, which will support their themes, to have the audience relate to and appreciate what they are trying to show or explain. Then finally, during the conclusions, the tour guide will have to reinforce the theme by showing one last time the relationship between the stops or the content that are designed to get across to their tourists. So this is the structure of their guided tour. So they were also asked to present few other topics. For example, they can use the topic of forest supermarket, survival in tropical rainforest, ritual and evil plant, or relationship of plant and the culture of people. And then they will have to do or craft their own themes for each of these topics, and they will select their material, their resource material in the forest. So they apply many of this body of text in their guided tour. They use the taboo, they can use the folklore stories, belief system, even resource management. They can use a social norm, or even using the craft and songs. So these are the few body of traditional ecological knowledge they can use. Now, using the taboos, for example, I'm sure you still remember what happened in Sabah when they was hit by the last earthquakes with a 5.9 magnitude, which caused the community angry with such activity, which done by the foreign tourists who were fully naked or partially naked on Mount Kinabalu. So one of the ways to ensure your guided tour is more interesting is that you need to apply some indigenous stories, or even you can use analogies or activities to make your guided tour more interesting. Under the TORE model, T-O-R-E, the E represents the entertainment. For example, you can use a plant. In this case, you can use a leaf as indicator whether you as visitors is welcome during your stay in a longhouse. The other thing they can use is using the approved custom, ritual, or even traditional management practice to help protect ecosystem and the species of the sites. This is very important to ensure the sustainability of the areas. For example, fixed trees. Many countries actually treat fixed tree, especially the strangling one, as home or place of God, a place of prayers, home of spirits, and subjects of taboo, and even have biological basis as home and restaurant for wildlife. Another one is resource management. Is you can actually illustrate the use of tagang system. which have to replenishing riverine fish stocks. Yeah. In those days, the native tradition of preserving and protecting fish stock for their benefit, their village. And the village look after a stretch of river or close to them, that close to them. The villages themselves are the policemen. They will protect, they will force the rules, and they do not allow anyone to fish in that particular area and not to pollute the river. So out of that, the result of our study shows that using various indicators, about 10 indicators, the results show the mean score were well above 5.52, meaning to say that out of 7, the scale of 7, all the score of indicators indicate that it is about 5.52. So when comparing Malaysian and foreigners has higher mean score as compared to Malaysians. It shows that the guided tour using the traditional ecological knowledge as the themes and as the topic has actually very effective in terms of ensuring the experience or enhance the experience of the visitors. Okay? And their guided tour also lead to their own perception, their own desire in future, what they intend to do. For example, they have high desire to attend another guided tour. They have high desire to return for another visit, and they want to stay longer. What does it mean? It means it has a commercial implication which would eventually contribute to economic sustainability of the areas. So from the perspective of tour guide themselves, I did the qualitative survey to the 3 of them. For example, Nicole, he says that it is very important to include the traditional ecological knowledge in the tour guidings because he says that it draws the attentions of visitors, making the tour more memorable, and the services of tour guides will be very much appreciated. So this is from the perspective of tour guide themselves. So in terms of summary and conclusions, we know though that traditional ecological knowledge is still as integral part of the indigenous culture in Sarawak, despite its progression, erosion, and conversion of this world in terms of global warming, flattening, and crowding of the world. The study have shown that the use of text TEK as topic and theme appeared to have further enhanced visitors' experience, which positively had affected visitors' thinkings or learning and affecting their feeling, would enhance their satisfactions, and that perhaps has led to their behaviors. So lastly, in terms of contributions, in 4 perspectives, from the perspective of conservation of biodiversity, the use of topic themes and self-enforced rule could be locally adopted as complementary interpretive qualities to further support the application of thematic interpretation in ensuring sustainable tourism development of the areas or the guided tours. Secondly, from the ecotourism industry, it's enhanced the tourism industry business through improved quality of interpretive guided tour. And this perhaps will lead to other kind of outcome that are of special interest to the tourism industry. For example, it have increased their business profitability. It will entice more repeat visitors and to sustain their operations. From the local community, from the perspective of community-based tourism, traditional ecological knowledge can be transformed into a tourism products which provide employment for their host community, and also social cultural sustainability of their cultures. Thereby, they have to preserve their traditional ecological knowledge, which is now getting more eroded. From the professional of tour guides, the use or the weavings of traditional ecological knowledge help the tour guide to become more allied in promoting conservation awareness and protecting the natural and cultural heritage. It also helps to motivate them to learn more about the traditional ecological knowledge, and also there is a need to incorporate this knowledge as a topics for them in the future. The last one is in terms of biocultural significance. It helped to promote the empirical research for almost disappearing traditional ecological knowledge of the local community in the field of ecotourism. It will have to encourage more researchers to do more research as regards to the use of traditional ecological knowledge in tour guiding in the future. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. I hope this paper, these presentations will incite your understandings about the use of traditional ecological knowledge in tour guiding. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victor Luna. Thank you to our dear speakers for this session. So thank you everyone for joining this session. For some sort of announcement, the session recording will be made available at www.responsibleborneo.com/ICRTH 2022 program. A certificate of attendance will be issued to delegates who complete a post-conference survey. Please find the survey at www.responsibleborneo.com/ICRTH 2022. The survey will be closed after 1 week. For more information about ICRTH 2022 and other conference sessions, please visit www.responsibleborneo.com/ICRTH 2022 program. And for any inquiries about ICRTH 2022, feel free to contact us via ICRTH2022@responsibleborneo.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.